This is the video analysis of the mini lesson for the Access program on May 26. The class was conformed only by 5 students with similar levels of English, which were between A1 and B2.
Taking into account that the majority of the students were audiolingual learners, the lesson plan was based on activities according to that characteristic.
And today we are going to teach you about modal verbs of obligation and necessity. To start, I need you to tell me what things do you do for obligation at school?
In this mini lesson, we use all the materials that were expected to be used according to the lesson plan, such as the whiteboard and the flashcards for the first activity.
But we didn't realize that the projector was on even though we hadn't planned to use it in our lesson and it was occupying space.
One of the weakest points was that the time set on the planification for the warm-up wasn't achieved.
However, one of the strongest points was the use of a control technique according to Brown 2001. That technique is called setting, in which the teacher directs attention to the topic by verbal evocation of the context relevant to the lesson.
Modal verb is a type of verb that is used to indicate modality. Do you know any modal verb? For the presentation part, one of the strongest points was the use of a semi-control technique called question and answer referential. According to Brown, an activity with this technique involves prompting of responses by means of referential question, and the teacher doesn't know beforehand the response information. This technique was used to know the prior knowledge of the student, since we didn't know it. Another strong point was the use of a control technique called copying, in which the students write down the text presented visually.
But one of the weakest points was that we didn't ask the students if everything was clear, in order to check if they had understood what was explained.
Today we are going to see modal verbs for obligation and necessity. And for obligation, there are two modal verbs. After watching the video, I noticed that I should be more confident when it comes to explain the content in order to look more secure in front of the class. They are quite similar, but must it's used for to express personal opinion. But have to is related to law or regulation. And for necessity, the modal verb.
One thing I would like to point out here is that when my classmate is doing his activity, I didn't know what to do in front of the class. The same with him when I was talking.
Before see before the main verb for the main verb and after the subject. According to Scribner 2005, flashcards are used to illustrate presentation of language by giving a visual image.
For this reason, we use flashcards to exemplify what was previously presented.
For the practice activity, we chose flashcards in order to make the students take a more active part in the lesson, even though it resulted being too teacher-centered.
The other weak point was the difficulty of the activity. It seemed to be really easy for the level of the target language of the student.
In contrast, we can say that the activity was well explained by giving the learners an example before they started working.
And last but not least, one of the things I really need to improve is the use of my voice and the space of the classroom as a teacher.
Yes, very good. That's an obligation. This one, they are in a test. You must copy that. Very good. It's also an obligation. Here, the teacher is explaining something. You want to pay attention. Yeah, very good. And another form. Okay. This one. Very good. This.
In this part, we try to use Brown's principle of the anticipation of reward, giving the students a good feedback for their participation in order to keep them confident while answering in the activity.
You need raise your hand. Very good. And the last one. You must start. Very good. For the next activity, I need you to gather in pairs as you raise your. I will work with you. So I need you have 6 minutes to create three sentences using each of one each of one verbs. For math, have to need to either affirmative or the negative form. And you have to write down because then you have to share with your classmates. He has a doubt. Yes. If you have anything else, please ask. About the topic is about the obligation and necessity in school, an everyday situation.
In the production part, we tried to create the conditions for the students to work in pairs. Since we didn't know how close they were, we let them work with whoever they wanted to.
We prepared an activity in pairs, but we had an odd number of students, so we decided that one of us should work with one of them.
One of the weakest points was that the instruction for the activity was not given completely, since one of the students asked what was missing.
What's more, we didn't check if the students had understood what they had to do. That could be solved by asking a student to explain in their own words what they were supposed to do.
In the strongest points can be noticeable that the students were given the time for the activity, that they were told when they had 1 minute left, and that the entire activity was done in the time that was set.
We made a correct use of the space of the classroom by going to where the students were working to check how they were working and to clarify their doubts.
Finally, we all worked together in the revision of the activity by using a control technique called checking proposed by Brown. This technique is about the teacher giving an activity and checking the students' work after it was done.
We are done. At least one.
In this activity, we also try to use Brown's principle of risk taking by letting the students to take calculated risks in attempting to use language. Although the activity was based on writing sentences, The students were supposed to share what they wrote with their classmates, no matter if their sentences were grammatically incorrect.
Actually, you not decide if you want to do it or not. But with must, you must do that. So it's like in some places you can't.
Here, it was the only part of the entire class that the native language of the student was used. Spanish was used just to clarify a doubt about vocabulary. Now in Bootcamp Maxim number 9, we use the mother tongue selectively in a way to make easier the understanding of a word and to not get stuck in that part.
So 1 minute left. Did you finish? How many? How many sentences? The same or different? Yeah, we are going to share. Okay. Now, please. Now we are going to share what we wrote. So, who wants to start? Okay. That wasn't last exam. You have to study. Okay. Okay. Yeah. How the same. Right. You? Can you repeat this? Okay. Um,
After checking the answers, we realized that one point wasn't understood, and we used a little of time to re explain.
personal, as I said it before, it's an obligation. It's something that you must do. But in case you have to, you have the decision to do it. I don't know if it's clear. Okay.
Here we can see we ask the students what they have learned and what wasn't clear in order to check if they understood and to clarify doubts.
Okay. Think about places where you can't smoke. You know what is smoke? So in some places you mustn't smoke. You never.
To finish, the least successful part was the timing because, since we didn't know how quickly the students would finish the activities, the class was shorter than it was planned. According to Ferguson, when that happens, a teacher has to have a backup plan, or at least an extra activity to fill the extra time. That is something that we would do if we had to do the class again.
The most successful part of the lesson was that the students were engaged all the time and they were willing to do the activities of the lesson plan without complaint.